What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we are updating Dinomorphia with the release of Dimension Force. Finally, the deck got the cards it needed in order to compete. Before, I would say the deck was just a weird gimmick that you needed a lot of anti-meta cards in the main deck like Skill Drain and stuff to work, but now the deck has basically a Skill Drain of its own. It has a really good card that can potentially win you games by just activating one copy of it, so I feel like the deck can be a very scary deck right now, so if you're not prepared for it, you can expect to lose some games to this deck because it does have some really strong cards, and I've been enjoying the strategy of the deck about paying half your life points, like living on the edge. It's a really fun deck that we've never seen something similar to it in the past, so really fun. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off the monsters, we have 3 copies of Theresia. This is the main normal summon of the deck. When she's summoned, you can set a Dinomorphia trap from your deck, and all those monsters have effects that they're basically, when they're destroyed, you can banish a trap from the grave to special summon level 4 lower Dinomorphia monster from the grave, except themselves. The 2 main deck monsters do have that effect, so this deck can be quite grindy. Even though you do lose a lot of life points during the early game, the thing is, this deck does have ways of protecting itself from those attacks or those effects that can try to finish off the rest of your like 1000 or 500 or 250 remaining life points, so it can grind really well, even though it seems like it's going to end the game very quickly. And all those monsters that keep coming back, keep in mind these are dinosaurs, so level 4 dinosaurs can give us some of the best Xyz monsters in the game, so those floating effects that Theresia and the next monster have can come in handy very easily just because of all those effects that trap cards need in order to destroy your own monsters to get their effects, so you basically get the floats. We have 3 copies of Dinomorphia Adiplus. This is a card that is basically the Foolish Berry of the deck. On summon, it sends Dinomorphia card from the deck to the grave. Of course, both these monsters, if you have 2000 or less life points, they inflict 500 damage to your opponent, which is not the greatest thing ever, but it can sometimes help you push for games just a little bit more. And this card has the exact same effect. If it's destroyed, you can banish a trap from the grave to special summon another level 4 lower Dinomorphia from the grave, usually Theresia, and you want to be using these, their own effect during the first turn, and then summoning the other one during the other turn, so you can basically keep looping their effects as well as getting a body on the field, so you can get the most advantage out of this. So these are the 2 main deck monsters that we have that we need to max out on both of them, because of other cards as well, because we need to send these from the deck to the grave in order to fuse, so you have to max out on them, because if you run out of them, that means that you will not be able to activate Frenzy or Domain during the late game, and you will not be able to get to your win conditions. Now, we do play some more monsters. We have 2 copies of Lilith, Lady of Lament. I do like this card in the deck. I feel like some people might say it's unnecessary, but the thing is, Frenzy is such a powerful card that I just absolutely want to see it turn 1, which is why I'm also maxing Trap Trick on top of all of that, because if you don't see Frenzy, you're not going to win. And if you see Frenzy, sometimes just Frenzy on its own can be enough to win you a game. So I feel like making sure that you see it 100% of the time is correct, no matter how you're going to play this deck, no matter what other cards you play. So I feel like the 2 Lilith makes it so that we have 5 good normal summons that can get you to Frenzy, which 5 is the perfect number in a 40 card deck as far as normal summons go, so you don't brick on them. So I feel like 2 Lilith makes a lot of sense. We have 2 copies of Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. The deck does lack some going second power, so this is the card that basically fixes that issue, because Adiplus is a monster that you can summon, send a Dino to the grave, and then because it has 1000 attack points, you can link it off into Almiraj. So there you go, you have 2 dinosaurs in the grave right away for this card, and we all know how good UCT can basically be and destroy boards on its own. Amazing card. And the last monster we have in the main deck is 1 copy of Miscellaneousaurus. This is a card you can search with Fossil Dig and basically make sure that Theresia will resolve, so you can basically get to your place safely. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Fossil Dig. Of course, it's a dinosaur deck, we're gonna max out on Fossil Dig. We have 3 copies of Prosperity. Now the thing is that this card, I feel like, makes the deck a little bit better than it should be, just because it's one of those decks that you don't really need extra cards in your hand, but you basically need the specific card that you want to see in your hand to fix it. Sometimes you want a play, sometimes you want a card that can protect your play, so I feel like Extravagance wouldn't make that much sense in this deck, because you're not like looking to get more trap cards like an Eldritch deck. You want specific cards, so I feel like Prosperity is the way to go. But again, if you don't have access to Prosperity, you can replace this with Duality. It's not going to make that much of a difference. The only difference it would make is when you want to summon Tyranno during your own turn to basically push, so that would be a play that you would not be able to do if you play Pot of Duality. But again, if you cannot afford Prosperity, Duality works pretty much just as fine as the deck. It's just that Prosperity, not only does it not lock you from special summoning, but it helps you dig a little bit deeper than Duality. And we play 1 copy of Call by the Grave because Frenzy and Domain are cards that fuse from the deck, so you know they're gonna get asked a lot of the time, so we need to be able to protect them at least as consistently as possible. possible, and Call by the Grave, along with Solemn Strike in the main deck, of course, help with that. Now, let's move to the main course of the deck. We have the trap cards. First up, we have 3 copies of the new trap card that we got in Dimension Force, which is Dinomorphia Frenzy. This card is ridiculous. I don't know how many cards in the game exist that can win you a game just by activating themselves. Notorious cards that fit that category are like Mystic Mine, but the thing is, Mystic Mine will win you the game, but you're not doing anything. Basically, your opponent can't do anything, so they're gonna scoop if they don't have an out. This card on its own can basically get you 2 big bodies on the field that can push for a game, and a skill drain for any monster that your opponent has that has 1,000 or less attack points, just with this card. Because with this card, what you're going to do is you're going to pay half your life points, you're going to send one of your Stelbergia from your extra deck to the grave, along with your Theresia or Adiplus from the main deck to the grave to summon Kentergina. Then you're going to use Kentergina's effect, pay half your life points, you're 2,000 now, you copy Frenzy, and you do the same thing again, and you summon your Rexterm from the deck, from the extra deck, and then you're going to use Rexterm's effect when your opponent has a monster on the field, pay half to basically make your opponent's attack points the same as your life points. So with just one Frenzy, you are at 1,000 life points because you activated 3 Dinomorphia effects. So with Rexterm's effect, which is also a new card I'll talk about a little bit later once I get to the extra deck, your opponent will not be able to activate any monster effects with 1,000 or less attack points. So unless your opponent is prepared for something like this, for example, if you're playing against a super combo deck that doesn't have a lot of, let's say, staple cards, but rely on a lot of super monsters and to be able to make an unbreakable board, they will not be able to do anything. So this is why I'm saying that Frenzy on its own can win you games against a lot of stuff. So this is why I'm playing so many cards to turbo out this card, just because of how powerful it is, because this card can outright win you games if your opponent is just not prepared. We also play 3 copies of Dinomorphia Domain. This is the other fusion trap that the deck has. It's not as powerful as Frenzy, because it only sends from the main deck, not the extra deck, and Rexterm, in order to be summoned, it requires a fusion monster and a Dinomorphia monster, so you're not able to summon it with this card. But again, it's important because the more bodies you have on the field, the easier it's going to be to go for game, so you need to max out on this card as well, because at least it's a play with it you can do that will give you Kentergina on the field, which if you back her up with trap cards, sometimes you can win even without Rexterm's effect. We have 3 copies of Dinomorphia Sonic. This is the card that negates spells and traps, and all these other traps for Dinomorphias, they need to destroy a Dinomorphia monster you control in order to resolve. And I forgot to mention that all these traps in the graveyard, you can banish them. Half of them protect you from effect damage and half of them protect you from battle damage. So it's not like this deck becomes too risky when you play, just because you will feel like that you're going to lose by just like one Hayate direct attack or one activation of an effect that would deal burn. No, it's not that simple. This deck does have ways of protecting itself. And the thing about Sonic is the card that I'm maxing out because this deck is weak against back row decks. You can stop a lot of monster effects with Rexterm, but if you're playing against back row decks, this deck is where it struggles the most. So against Eldritch and against any deck that plays cards like Droplet, Forbidden Chalice, you need as many ways in the main deck to negate those cards just to make sure that you can win, which is why I'm also main decking a card that I'm usually not main decking in other trap decks, which I'll talk about later. So Sonic, I feel like it's a perfect card. It's searchable, it gives you a lot of protection. We have 2 copies of Dinomorphia Alert. This is the card that basically gets you 2 monsters on the field, which is what you want to do during your opponent's end phase. By paying half your life points, you're special summoning 2 Dinomorphia monsters from your graveyard whose total levels equal 8 or less. So usually you're going to be special summoning the 2 level 4s with this card. You can special summon Kentergina or Rexterm from the graveyard with this card as well, but the thing is, this card locks you into Dinomorphia monsters, so you want to use it during your opponent's end phase, and then during your own turn, you're going to summon Lagia and Dolka because you're bringing back dinosaurs, so you're going to have extra layers of protection with this card. We have 2 copies of Dinomorphia Brute. This is basically a breaksword card. You can pay half your life points to destroy a Dinomorphia monster you control, and 1 card your opponent controls, but again, your Dinomorphia main deck monsters float when they're destroyed, so this card doesn't have a hindrance, it actually has a benefit by destroying your own cards because you can loop their field effects once you summon them with the other one's effect, so not only are you destroying a card, but you also get either a Foolish Burial or a set trap card from your deck right away. Now for the trap cards that we have in the deck that are not Dinomorphia trap cards, we have 3 copies of Trap Trick. Same theory with Lilith. Even though this card will lock you from activating any other trap cards from the turn, if you don't have anything, this card getting you to a Frenzy can basically win you the game. So I don't really mind that I cannot activate any other trap cards. Of course, if you do have Frenzy already, you can get either an Alert or a Brute to have more protection and more recovery, but again, I want to turbo out Frenzy as quickly as possible, which is why I'm maxing out on this card as well. We play 3 copies of Solemn Strike. This card is very important in the deck. Not only will it give you Go Second power, that it's basically the reason it's being played in a lot of trap decks because it's a really powerful trap card when you combine with other board breaking cards, but in this deck it's even more important because your opponent is going to Ash Frenzy 100% of the time. If they have it, they're going to use it. So you need to be able to combo it with this card in order to protect it from Ash, because if it doesn't resolve, then you're not going to get any monsters on the field. And I'm also main decking 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Now, this is the card I was mentioning that I usually don't run in the main deck in trap decks. The reason being is that usually you want this card in the side for when your opponent sides in card like Lightning Storm, Evenly Matched, Feather Duster, and stuff like that. People that usually don't main deck. But in this deck, you need to protect your monsters from cards like Droplet, Chalice, Talents, and stuff like that. Cards that people do main deck occasionally. So I feel like being able to protect your plays from cards like this is super important for a deck like this. And if you can do that, you're going to win just with Rexterm's Skill Drain effect. So main decking Solemn Judgment is really cool. And the thing is, this card has direct synergy with the strategy of the deck because you pay half your life points. So you're going to make your opponent's life even more difficult because they will not be able to activate any monster effects with Rexterm. Now for the extra deck, let's start with a fusion monster. We have 3 copies of Dinomorphia Kentrigina. Now this card is the card that copies the trap cards in the graveyard, and it's the beater of the deck. So this card has a starting 4,000 attack points, but it loses attack equal to your life points. So you want to have as fewer life points as possible for a lot of reasons in this deck, and this is one of them. The less life points you have, the more attack points this card gets, so you basically can push for a game as quickly as possible. And the effect to copy trap cards is important because otherwise you would need to summon Rexterm right away, and not only that, but you will not be able to get your life points low enough in order to lock your opponent. But every time you activate one of these effects, you pay half your life points, so Kentrigina is going to get you to 2,000 after your Frenzy got you to 4,000, and Rexterm is going to get you to 1,000, so you basically get a pretty much free skill drain for no reason. So yeah, this card is push power, it gets your life points low, and it gets you your Rexterm on the field. Speaking of which, we have one of the new fusion monsters. This is 3 copies of Dinomorphia Rexterm. This card is the win con of the deck. Before, we needed to play skill drain and stuff like that in order to win. We don't need to anymore. This card covers everything. So this card is amazing. Your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters they control with an attack more than or equal to your life points. So you can see why you need to pay as much life points as possible early, because this card is going to lock your opponent out. And as long as you can protect this card from cards like Droplet, Chalice, and TTT with cards like Sonic and Solemn Judgment, you win the game. So this is why this deck is so good. Unless you're playing against Eldritch, you can have an easy ride against a lot of the current meta decks. I mean, what is your opponent going to do if they're playing Despia? All of their monsters are really big. Even Aluber has 1,800 attack. So if you get this on the field with 1,000 life points, not even Aluber will be able to search. This card is going to basically destroy any type of mid-range or combo deck. It's not even funny. This card is absolutely ridiculous. And its other effect is also really good because as a quick effect, you can pay half your life points to turn the attack of all monsters your opponent controls equal to your life points. So not only do you pay your life points so that your opponent will not be able to activate even more monster effects, but you can also make sure that your opponent is not going to just summon a monster with branded fusion that has a lot of attack points to run this over. No, you're just going to basically make their attack points like 500 to 150. So this card is amazing. Play 3 copies of Stelbergia. Now the effect of this card does not matter. The only reason this card is here is that so you can fuse it from the extra deck with Frenzy along with one of your main deck monsters to summon Kentrigina, and then do the same to summon Rexterm. You'd never summon this card. It's basically garbage. You just need it for free fusion material. For the Xyz monsters, we have 1 copy of Lagia. This is another card that basically adds to the protection that cards like Sonic and Solemn Judgment can provide, and this is why Alert is such a good card. We play 1 copy of Dolka. You only want to summon this card if your opponent has gotten rid of your Rexterm, because as long as you have Rexterm on the field, negating monster effects is not going to come up because your opponent is not going to be able to activate anything unless you're playing in a matchup like Eldritch, which you will need these cards to negate Eldritch from the hand, because Rexterm is not going to negate monster effects in the hand or the grave. Your opponent has to control them, so in matchups like this card can come in hand. We play 1 copy of Tornado Dragon. Again, it's for those matchups that this deck struggles against that have a lot of back row. 1 copy of Abyss Dweller, because Rexterm, I mentioned, it only negates monsters on the field, so you need to be able to cover the matchups that have a lot of effects in the grave. 1 copy of Gustav Max. This is here just for the case that you draw both Tyrannos, you can summon them both, and somehow you did not manage to kill your opponent, which is not going to happen often, but it's not like the extra deck is super tight, so yeah, this card can help you win some games just because of the extra added damage. And the only link monster we play in the deck is the 1 copy of Almirage. Because of the play I mentioned with Adiplus, you can summon it, send a dino to the grave, you link it away, and you have 2 dinosaurs in the graveyard for Ultimate Conductor Tyranno for this going second play that can sometimes win games on its own. So yep, that's the deck, guys. This deck now is actually a good contender. If you were a fan of the deck before, I guarantee that right now you're going to enjoy the deck even more than before, and you're going to have a lot more success as well. So do not sleep on this deck. It's not only is a really good pure deck, but we're also going to see it in some branded versions, because the OCG showed us that just playing Theresias and Frenzies in other decks can also become a really powerful engine that can win you games. So be in mind for the pure deck and for the engine in other decks, it's going to be really, really good. And if you're unprepared for this, it's going to be basically the Mystic Mine of the format. If you are not prepared to deal with Rexterm, you are going to lose games just like that. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.